Tani is a lonely loser with no friends and no hoes. However, his life takes a turn when the most popular baddie in school takes a sudden interest in him and starts doing everything to rizz him up. It all started on a regular day with Tani sitting alone in class when suddenly Suzuki, the most popular trap queen in school, tries to talk to him. However, since Tani is a rizzless creep, he treats her like background noise, but somehow getting brutally shut down excites her. Just then, two of Suzuki's baddie friends show up, and they start gushing about Suzuki's new eyelashes. Suzuki asks for Tani's opinion, but he coldly tells her that he knows nothing about eyelashes. Hearing his icy voice tickles Suzuki's wet flaps, making her laugh like a dummy in love. Her friends are confused to see her this excited, since Tani is obviously not showing any interest in her. While staring at Tani, Suzuki reflects on how deeply in love she is with him, but she just can't bring herself to confess her feelings. Even though everyone in class sees Tani as a creepy weirdo, to Suzuki, he is a stallion who speaks his mind freely, and that's why she is simping hard for him. In the past, Suzuki had always prayed for an opportunity to tell Tani how she felt about him, and one day her dream came true when the teacher asked everyone to switch seats. Somehow, she got to sit next to Tani, but instead of expressing her feelings, the dumb girl got so nervous that she didn't know what to say, so she ended up rambling just to get his attention. In the present, Suzuki desperately wants to express how she feels, but she is scared of what people will say since she is the cheerful class beauty, while Tani is the emo loner of the class. That day after class, she accidentally runs into none other than Tani at the locker and freaks out. Nervously, she asks why he is still in school, and Tani tells her it's because he has to submit some committee work. Not knowing what to say next, Suzuki then shyly asks if they can walk home together, and Tani agrees. On their way home, Suzuki starts asking a bunch of stupid questions, but Tani ignores her just like that Latina with a fatty ignores you. This continues until Suzuki brings up a massive burger the size of Tani's head that she recently ate, and she starts raving about it. However, just when she thinks she is the most boring human on Earth, Tani asks if the burger was good. Suzuki immediately says it was super good, then asks if he would like to grab one with her sometime. Tani accepts her invitation, and for a brief moment, Suzuki is unable to believe that Tani, the school's resident loner, is willing to go out with her. This makes her heart pound like it's on crack, and she gets so excited that she accidentally bumps hand with Tani. This makes her freak out, but to her shock, Tani holds her hand, and for a moment, everything around Suzuki seems to be moving in slow-mo. It all feels like a surreal dream as she can't believe she is holding hands with her crush.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
Suddenly, two girls from their school approach, so Suzuki gets super embarrassed and runs home immediately.
No! No! No!
Throughout that day at home, Suzuki couldn't stop thinking about holding hands with Tani. Even at night, she spent hours thinking about it that she slept late, and by the following morning, she woke up late for school. When she finally makes it to school later that afternoon, she is surprised to find that Tani is not at his desk. Just then, one classmate named Yamada approaches Suzuki and asks whether she and Tani are dating, explaining that one of their classmates saw them walking home together like lovebirds the day before. Suzuki freezes, unsure of what to say, and when she can't withstand the pressure any longer, she lies that it didn't happen. Just after she says this, Tani shows up to get a notebook from his desk, and Suzuki immediately feels like a two-timing Felicia for lying. Throughout that day in class, she can't concentrate as she just wants to apologize to Tani, but she is too shy to. When school closes for the day, Suzuki shakes like a faulty washing machine as she desperately tries to apologize before Tani leaves. While she is suffering from anxiety, Tani suddenly jerks her and then asks that they forget all that happened the day before. Right after saying that, he walks away, leaving her feeling more miserable than she already is. While she spirals emotionally, her classmates meet her and try to play with her. However, Suzuki can't contain her emotional outburst anymore, so she tells everyone she is in love with Tani and then confesses that they did indeed walk home together the day before. While she expects her classmates to make a mockery of her, she is taken aback when they all support her and encourage her to pursue her love interest. Feeling hyped up, Suzuki immediately runs after Tani, but she still cannot believe how easy it was to express her emotions in public. Meanwhile, as Tani walks home, he feels like trash for letting his emotions get the best of him and making him hold Suzuki's hand the day before. Suddenly, Suzuki eventually catches up with him, and while standing on the bridge, she loudly announces her love for him like a freak. Tani is caught off guard by her confession, but Suzuki steps forward and apologizes for lying in front of everyone, explaining that she did so because she was scared of what people would say. She tells him she wants to spend more time with him, and then admits she was super happy when he held her hand. After listening to all she has to say, Tani also admits that anytime she doesn't talk to him in class, he feels like a part of him is missing. Upon hearing this, Suzuki cries in excitement, so Tani tries to wipe her eyes with his handkerchief, but stops when he recalls she has mascara on. This makes Suzuki cry even more as she realizes that Tani overheard all she and her friends had been discussing in class days. The next day, while heading to school, Tani runs into mophead Yamada, who smacks him hard on the back like they are homies. When Tani asks why he is coming at him with such strong vibes, Yamada explains that since he is friends with Suzuki, that automatically makes them buddies. This makes Tani realize that everyone in school probably knows that he and Suzuki are now dating. So he tells Yamada that he wishes no one finds out that he and Suzuki are dating because he doesn't want to tarnish her cheerful image with his gloomy reputation. Yamada finds this amusing, but he tells Tani not to sweat over silly things like that. Like a friend would, he also assures Tani that Suzuki's love is genuine, and then reveals how the lover girl publicly confessed her love for him in class the previous day. Meanwhile, in class, Suzuki is being pestered by her girls Watanabe and Satu to gist them about her relationship with Tani. However, talking about it embarrasses Suzuki, so she tries her best to avoid the conversation. The girls quickly figure the reason she doesn't want to talk about Tani is because she sucks at conversation. To help her situation, Watanabe shows her an article that advises that the best way to be a conversation genius is by listening to your partner instead of yapping nonstop. With all these helpful tips, Suzuki declares that she is now determined more than ever to be the ultimate girlfriend to Tani. For her first task as the ultimate girlfriend, she says she will ask Tani to walk home with her that day. After school that day, Suzuki gets cold feet and is unable to ask Tani to walk home with her. But when Satu urges her, she shyly asks Tani to walk home with her. Moments later, as they leave the class together heading home, Suzuki is tense, and this makes her walk like an old geezer with huge sacks. On the way, the silence between them is that of a graveyard. While desperately trying to find a way to break the silence, Suzuki recalls her friend's advice to be a good listener, but she has no idea what actually interests Tani. Tani, on the other hand, tries to say something, but since he is too much of a shy virgin, he didn't know how to express himself. Noticing this, Suzuki asks if he wants to tell her something, but Tani denies it and nervously walks ahead. However, his reaction makes Suzuki wonder if Tani is bored being around her, and this increases her nervousness. A few minutes later, they arrive at the junction where they part ways, and Suzuki feels miserable because she had wanted to spend more time with Tani. To her shock, Tani grabs her by the hand and asks if they could spend more time together. This makes Suzuki smile like a fat brat in a candy store. With that, they head to a nearby park, where Tani asks if she will be free that weekend, and then invites her to a hamburger date. Feeling excited, Suzuki agrees and even suggests they hang out somewhere easy to find. Tani agrees and tries to look up Google ripoff for a hangout spot, but in the process, his latest search results show the ignorant dummy had been searching for ways to communicate with his girlfriend. Embarrassed by this, Tani immediately hides his phone from Suzuki and tries to run away in shame, but Suzuki catches him like a smash and dip boyfriend and tells him to chill. Still, Tani crumbles to the ground in shame, feeling like a monumental loser. But Suzuki lifts him from the pit of shame and tells him she finds it adorable that he thinks about her. Moved by her words, Tani hugs her and finally admits that he is balls deep in love with her too, explaining that he has always wanted to tell her but never knew how to put it into words. Suzuki blushes hard and turns into a boiling melting doll. Excited, she then suggests they also see a movie on the date, and Tani agrees. Later that day, Suzuki informs her girls of her first date with Tani, and she couldn't hide how excited she is about it. To make memories, Watanabe suggests Suzuki take pics with her babe, but Suzuki complains that she will be too embarrassed to. She also reminds her that she always looks like a dehydrated monkey anytime she snaps photos. But Watanabe insists she make unforgettable memories since it's her first date. When the weekend arrives, Suzuki waits for Tani, dressed like a TikTok baddie. She gets all nervous, thinking she might have overdressed, and anxiously waits to see what Tani will be wearing. Soon after, Tani shows up dressed like an underpaid waiter at a rundown bar, but Suzuki still finds him adorable. Before seeing the movie, they choose to stuff their face holes with burgers, but Suzuki suddenly recalls that she eats burgers like a starving bear and gets embarrassed. She notices Tani eating like a perfect gentleman, so she tries to emulate him. However, when she gets lost in the sauce, she unknowingly unleashes her beaver skills and starts foraging, which surprises Tani. After eating, they see a movie about a snowman who is tired of life and just wants to unalive himself, but a hot witch magically transforms his gloomy world into a beautiful paradise. The movie moves Suzuki to tears, while Tani is taken aback by how deeply emotional she can be. Once the movie ends, Suzuki quickly rushes to the restroom to apply makeup to her puffy eyes, so Tani won't find out she is a crybaby. Minutes later, as she leaves the restroom, she spots Tani standing in front of the movie poster like a lost bouncer, which indicates that he wants them to take a picture together. But Suzuki gets shy and refuses to take any pictures. Later, as the date comes to an end, they board a train home, but Suzuki feels horrible that the date ended because she was having so much fun. After they alight from the train and start walking the rest of the way home, Suzuki wishes the walk could stretch a bit longer so she could spend more time with Tani. As she tries to hold his hand, she freezes and pulls back, but Tani notices and takes her hand. Overwhelmed with emotions, Suzuki then admits that she had fun that day, and Tani also admits that he too enjoyed spending the day with her. Hearing this makes Suzuki blush with happiness, and when she can't control the drip in her kitty, she suggests they take a picture together. Tani is surprised that she wants to take a picture now after she earlier refused, so Suzuki explains that she wants to have something to remember their first date by. Tani then agrees, so Suzuki ends up taking a photo of them. When they finally arrive at their parting spot, Suzuki notices Tani staring at her bust area, which leaves her confused since she is flatter than the ground. Before she can ask if anything is wrong, Tani compliments the panda on her shirt, which makes her more jolly than a fatty seeing a burger. So she runs home in excess happiness, glittering like a Christmas tree and fully satisfied to have gone on a date. The next morning in school, Suzuki runs into Azuma, another one of her baddie friends. Azuma is desperately curious about Suzuki's relationship with Tani and demands she spill the tea. After Suzuki fills her in on her relationship with Tani, Azuma admits she is super jealous and wishes her boyfriend were as gentle as Tani. She explains that her current guy ghosted her because the idiot got thrown in juvie, and she doesn't know why she always falls for trap goons. When they get to class, Azuma continues her depressing yapping about her bad luck with guys. So Taira, another member of the Suzuki Friends gang, suggests she just follow sugar daddies instead of giving her cheeks excess mileage. However, Suzuki is of the opinion that bad boys are always the best because they are rough around the edges, just the way she likes it. Right after she says this, Yamada informs the lover girl that her boyfriend is over there, overhearing her degenerate nonsense. Hearing this, Suzuki freaks out and rushes to ask Tani if he heard anything. Tani replies that he heard it loud and clear, but he won't let little things like that get to him. Everyone is surprised by how chill Tani is, learning that his babe is a freak who likes bad boys. However, Taira, who has just learned that Suzuki and Tani are a couple, is even more surprised that everyone is cool with the fact that someone as cheerful as Suzuki is dating such a lonely weirdo. During lunch break, the weather gets unbearably hot, so Taira heads to the vending machine to get a cold drink. There he meets Suzuki, also getting a drink for herself and her man, so Taira uses the opportunity to ask why she chose to date Tani of all bottom barrel guys. Suzuki is confused by his question, so Taira explains that such a happy shoddy like her, who always reads the room, shouldn't be dating a loose-mouthed loser like Tani. Now that she understands his question, Suzuki smiles and explains to the nosy moron that she is attracted to Tani simply because he is the complete opposite of her. Later that day in class, Taira notices how friendly his other friends are with Tani, which confuses him. He finds it hard to understand how everyone just accepted Tani into their gang without any objection. After school that day, while Suzuki and Tani walk home together as usual, Tani shyly tells Suzuki that he would be willing to become a bad boy if that's her spec. However, he warns that he won't change his morals or ethics for anyone. This makes Suzuki realize that back then in class, when she carelessly talked about liking bad boys and Tani claimed he wasn't bothered, he had been capping. So she teases him a bit about it, then says she finds it adorable. Confused, Tani asks what she means when she says she finds him adorable, but Suzuki refuses to give a clear answer and just leaves bro in his state of confusion. Later that day at home, Tani wakes to find his fat Garfield sitting on his face and almost suffocating him to the afterlife. So he takes the culprit to the living room, where he meets his mom and granny. After he tells them that the cat almost cut his life short, the granny makes a joke out of it and then calls the silly cat adorable. The mention of the word adorable makes Tani wonder whether whenever Suzuki calls him adorable, she is referring to him as a pet. The next day, Suzuki and her crackhead brother Rudo hurriedly prepare for school. After they're done, Rudo gives Suzuki a ride to school on his cool bike. On the way, they speed past Tani, who is too broke to afford a ride, so he relies on his Legetis Benz to get to school instead. When Tani notices them, he gets jealous, but Amura pops out of nowhere to clarify that the guy riding the bike isn't some rival but Suzuki's older brother. Soon, Suzuki joins them, and Amura asks if she can introduce her to her bad boy brother, but Suzuki refuses and advises her to seek therapy. After school that day, Suzuki excitedly gets ready for her usual walk home with her heartthrob, but Tani crushes her expectations by informing her that he has to stay back for library duties. Instead of going home alone, Suzuki chooses to sneak into the library moments later so she can see him. When Tani catches her sneaking around and asks what she's up to, Suzuki lies that she wants to borrow a book to read, even though deep down Tani is glad to have her around. He doesn't want her waiting so long for him, so he tells her to go home if she ever feels bored. However, Suzuki misreads it as her bothering him, which makes her feel bad, so she leaves him alone to get a book. Tani quickly realizes she might have taken it the wrong way, so he approaches and asks her to wait for him so they can walk home together, and this instantly brightens Suzuki up. Moments later, while Suzuki waits for Tani outside the library, she spots one of their teachers, Mr. Gomapon, who looks like Japanese Rick Ross, riding a tiny bike meant for the little Aidens, and she finds it amusing. Shortly afterwards, after Tani finishes his library duties, he meets her outside and they walk home together. On the way, Suzuki tells him of Mr. Gomapon and his funny antics, which she says she finds silly but adorable. Hearing her mention the word adorable again prompts Tani to ask her what she even means when she calls someone adorable. Noticing that Suzuki is confused by his question, Tani explains that he can understand that a cat is adorable, but he doesn't see how a grown man with a mature eggplant can be adorable. Suzuki then clarifies that by adorable, she means charming. Shortly afterwards, they arrive at the junction where they part ways. Before leaving, Suzuki shyly runs her fingers through her hair and tells Tani that she likes how they are slowly discovering the things they both enjoy. In response, Tani gently pats her head, causing her to blush ambulance red. Then, he cups her cheeks like he does his cat and tells her that he finds her adorable too. Overwhelmed with freaky emotions, Suzuki's face burns like a hot stove while she feels her panties getting sticky. The following day in school, Yamada and Taira unexpectedly run into Tani in the hallway. Feeling guilty, Taira then openly confesses to Tani that he had earlier questioned Suzuki why she chose to date a worthless loser like him. him. Yamada calls Taira a stupid donkey for even doing that, but Tani calmly tells him it's fine. Meanwhile, the girls are gisting about big black rods they would love to smash one day when they suddenly see Tani walking alongside Yamada and Taira. They also notice that Tani is smiling like a fool, which surprises them and makes Suzuki jealous since Tani had never smiled when he was with her. The next day in school, Suzuki and her girls discuss the upcoming summer festival, and Suzuki is super excited to attend with her bae. However, Satu spoils her mood by reminding her that before the festival, they have to deal with the end-of-term exams first. Later that day in class, the big mustache teacher reminds everyone to read for the upcoming exams. So once the teacher leaves, Amura and Yamada quickly suggest they all study together as a gang. However, when Yamada asks Tani to join them for the study session, Tani, as usual, coldly declines the offer, leaving them thinking he is feeling too smart to associate with bird brains like them. But before they start planning a villain arc, Suzuki immediately explains that Tani can't study with them because he has library studies to attend to. Since that's the case, Amura and Yamada then suggest that they all study at the library instead. Moments later, while they study at the library, Yamada and Amura find it mission impossible to understand a single thing, since their brains are smoother than Dwayne Johnson's bald head. So they both decide to disturb Tani to teach them. Watching her friends get all chummy with her man makes Suzuki secretly happy, and she smiles sheepishly. When Satu notices this, she asks why she is all smiles, and Suzuki shyly explains that she feels like a proud mama seeing the person she loves and her friends getting close. Feeling left out, Satu asks if she can also make friends with Tani, and Suzuki says yes, explaining that it's too easy since they're both loners. A few minutes later, after they're done studying, they all leave the library together. While heading home, Satu tries to befriend Tani by apologizing for any disturbance she and her friends caused during his library duties. But Tani tells her it's fine and then admits that he actually had fun with them around. The way he says it makes Satu laugh like a weirdo, and Tani also joins her laughing. At the end of the day, the library experience intensifies Tani's bond with Suzuki's friends. Later that night, Suzuki learns that a new convenience store has just opened near her crib, and she excitedly wants to check it out. As she wears her slides, her mom asks her to get toiletries, while her brother teases her for going out dressed like a homeless bum. Even so, Suzuki couldn't care less, since she feels confident that she's in her neighborhood, and there's no way Tani will see her dressed that way. When she finally arrives at the convenience store, she bumps into Yamada, who is also dressed like a failed SoundCloud rapper, and they both laugh at each other's bad fashion choices. On entering the store, they discover that Taira is working there, so they tease him for overworking himself like a middle-aged man with 4 little Aidens at home he needs to feed. After they're done shopping, they leave the store, and while slurping ice cream at the entrance, Suzuki comments on how she loves the smell of rain on a chilly evening. However, Yamada can't perceive any smell of rain, since his nostrils have lost their sense of smell from too much inhaling of white powder. Just then, a hot biker baddie named Nabe, who is a friend of Suzuki, shows up to also shop in the newly opened convenience store. The first thing she notices is Suzuki's old papa's shorts, so she jokes that Tani will catch her dressed like an old pensioner. However, Suzuki isn't bothered at all since she is confident that Tani won't suddenly show up. Just as those words leave her mouth, Bro shows up on his bicycle, and the instant Suzuki sets eyes on him, she pulls a father move and vanishes. But Tani already saw her and figures she must be hiding behind the store. As he tries to confront her, Yamada and Nabe stop him and somehow manage to convince him that Suzuki isn't there, and he is just imagining things. Once Tani enters the store to get what he came for, Suzuki uses that opportunity to quickly run home before Tani sees her dressed like a grandma. But since she already runs like a grandma, Tani eventually catches up with her on his bicycle and asks why she is running away from him, like he has body odor. Feeling miserable, Suzuki then explains her reason, but Tani tells her that he isn't bothered if she isn't dressed like a baddie. Still, Suzuki is embarrassed by the situation, so Tani asks why she isn't bothered that Yamada and Nabe saw her dressed that way. Stunned by the question, Suzuki explains that it's because Yamada and Nabe have been her besties since they were little, so she has no reason to be embarrassed that they saw her dressed that way. When she notices her explanation kinda made Tani visibly upset, she asks what the problem is, and Tani tells her that he feels jealous of how long Yamada and the others have been friends with her. Suzuki then decides to explain how different he and her friends are using a food analogy. She explains that if she is presented with a random plate of badly arranged food and a nicely presented one, she would rather give him the nicely presented dish, even though they taste the same. But Tani tells her that if it's a dish he likes, no matter how it's been served, he will clean it and leave no crumbs. Suzuki is taken aback by his response, but hearing it makes her smile. Now feeling much better, she asks that they ride his bicycle together, and Tani agrees. As they ride down the street, Tani remarks that he loves the smell of rain on a chilly evening, which makes Suzuki blush as she realizes they both enjoy the same thing. On the night of the summer festival, Suzuki arrives beautifully dressed in a yukata, and knowing this is the first time Tani will see her in one makes her nervous. Soon afterwards, she meets Tani at the train station, who is dressed in his usual waiter's uniform. When Tani sees her, he nearly has a jizz bomb, but he ends up complimenting how beautiful she looks. Suzuki freezes at the compliment since this is the first time he has ever called her beautiful. However, to avoid making the situation more awkward than it already is, she quickly asks them to head to the festival. Later, when they arrive at the festival, they have fun playing all sorts of games and enjoying a variety of food. While searching for more fun activities, Suzuki spots a fat Discord mod getting intimate with his 4th baby mama, which makes her uncomfortable, thinking she and Tani might later get that close. While she is lost in thought thinking about this, Tani takes her hand and asks her to go for a walk with him. Suzuki agrees and follows him like a dummy, and as they climb a steep road, she begins to wonder where Tani is taking her. Tani leads her up to a rooftop where she finds people lounging, and that's when she learns that his intention is to show her the much-anticipated festival fireworks. Soon, when the fireworks start, Suzuki almost loses her mind from the thrill, and when she tries to capture the moment, she accidentally drops her phone. But Tani activates his Spider-Man reflexes to catch the phone midair, and in the process, he and Suzuki, who also reaches for her phone, almost kiss. Feeling shy, the worthless virgins immediately maintain their distance. Tani then suggests they also see the fireworks next year, and this excites Suzuki, as she realizes that Tani has no intention of dumping her for some hoe next year. The next day in school, a girl named Nishi is having a nervous breakdown because she is antisocial. Her worst nightmare is having to communicate with people, so she prefers to be alone. While she crashes out, her friend Honda shows up and tries to get her to talk to other classmates. But Nishi complains that no matter how hard she tries to communicate, her thoughts never come out well in words. Even worse, she says, when it's a guy, she gets nervous and then confesses that she's been thinking about a particular guy lately. When Honda asks who this Prince Charming is that she's been thinking about, Nishi reveals that it's Tani. Turns out, over the past week, she and Tani had been stuck on library duties, and that's when she started catching feelings. However, she suspects Tani is in a relationship because she has been seeing a pink-haired girl sneaking into the library to see him. Also, during a previous library duty, Nishi noticed two delinquents disturbing Tani, and to her shock, Tani responded calmly to them. However, the way he responded made her laugh, and while she laughed, she noticed that one of the delinquents, who turned out to be Yamada, was eyeballing her hard. While the girls gist, Yamada suddenly walks in, as if summoned, to interrupt their conversation, and the instant Nishi sees him, she gets tense and starts sweating buckets. After Yamada borrows a book from Honda, he takes a sudden interest in a sticker on the desk and starts yapping about how much he loves gathering stickers. This makes Nishi laugh shyly, and when Yamada notices, he stares at her weirdly. Suddenly, Suzuki shows up complaining about a huge dragonfly in their class and asks Yamada to help capture it. Yamada agrees, and as he leaves to help, Suzuki teases him for trying to rizz up cute baddies from the next class. Embarrassed, Yamada shyly denies it, but deep down he can't stop thinking about Nishi. Meanwhile, Nishi tells Honda that Yamada is the delinquent she mentioned earlier, but Honda tells her that even though Yamada has a thugged out face, he is no delinquent. She explains that she and Yamada used to be in the same class when they were little. She also reveals that ever since they were little, Yamada had this stupid habit of being drawn to the laugh of someone he never expected to laugh. Afterwards, he gets so obsessed with them and keeps thinking about them, even though the idiot himself isn't really aware he is doing all of this. Upon hearing this, Nishi realizes Honda is right since Yamada has been frequenting their class for days now for no solid reason. Shortly afterwards, all the students gather at the school hall where the bald-headed principal informs them of the summer vacation and then begs them to keep it in their pants during the holiday. After the long, boring speech, Suzuki and the gang excitedly discuss how they're going to spend the holidays. Just then, Yamada interrupts, asking for advice on how to ask a girl for her Snapchat. Everyone is stunned by the question, and that's when they quickly figure that bro must be simping for a girl. After teasing him for being a simp, Suzuki suggests he takes a photo of the shoddy he be crushing on, and then promises to send the photo later, so she will have no choice but to give him her contact. Taira, on the other hand, feels it's kinda scary to ask some random stranger for a contact, but everyone looks at him like some rizzless dweeb with zero game. To avoid any confusion, Yamada explains that he isn't balls deep in love yet, but he just wants to learn more about his crush because he feels he might soon fall in love. Hearing this, everyone is shocked, and then they happily celebrate Yamada's exit from the Single Gooners Club. Moments later, Yamada returns to rizz Nishi up, and after using the pickup line he learned from Reddit, he asks her for her contact. Shocked by this, Nishi freaks out since this is the first time any guy has ever made a move on her. After crashing out, she finally agrees to share her contact, and doing this makes her happy. Later that night, Suzuki feels restless because her peaches won't stop itching, so she calls Tani to ask if they can meet at the library the next day, and the blind simp agrees. The following day, Tani meets up with Suzuki, and they head to the city library. However, when they get inside, they are shocked to see it crowded with people gooning Playboy magazines, and since they cannot secure seats, they are forced to leave. Suzuki then suggests they hang out somewhere else, and while she searches Google for a nice spot, Tani suddenly suggests they go to his crib instead. Caught off guard by the sudden invitation, Suzuki freaks out, but Tani explains that it's way better than finding a hangout spot in the hot sun. The first thought that comes to Suzuki's mind is his parents, but when Tani tells her his mom and granny are out, Suzuki reluctantly agrees to go. Later, when they arrive at his crib, they dive right into studying, as if they are serious about life. After a few minutes in, Suzuki's stomach growls like a hungry bear, so Tani microwaves food for both of them. While eating, Suzuki asks if he is the type of guy who would introduce his babe to his family, but Tani replies that he usually doesn't tell his family anything about himself. Not wanting to pry further, Suzuki suggests they resume studying once they finish eating. In response, Tani mentions that he forgot a textbook in his room, and as he leaves to retrieve it, Suzuki grows curious about his goon cave and follows him. When they get inside his room, she notices how neat it is and geeks out. While checking out his room, she finds his yearbook and almost bursts out laughing when she sees how stupid he used to look in the past. Suddenly, Suzuki gets too close for comfort, and Tani tenses up, thinking he is about to get some cottonmouth Nechosaurus Rex. But he gets curved like a fool, only to realize that Suzuki is only fascinated with with Mr. Garfield, leaving him disappointed. Hours later, Suzuki is about to leave, so Tani escorts her outside the house. There, she starts playing jumping jacks with slabs and almost hugs the ground, but Tani catches her like Spider-Man before she hits the ground. At that moment, Tani's midget granny returns from the market and catches them building plot. The old geezer smiles happily, thinking her little grandson finally wants to use his tiny pee-pee for the first time, but Suzuki apologizes and explains that she isn't some call girl. To clear the air, Tani then introduces Suzuki as his girlfriend, so the granny gives Suzuki some vegetables, grateful to her for offering her kitty to her virgin grandson. Later that evening, when Suzuki gets home, she shows her mom the vegetables and then informs her that she now has a boyfriend. Happy with the news, the mom asks her to invite Tani for lunch sometime, and Suzuki promises she will. The following week, summer break ends, so in class the teacher, who looks like a retired crack addict, announces the upcoming cultural festival. He also informs the students that instead of a cultural play, they will all have to participate in a food and beverage competition. After school that day, everyone gets busy preparing for the food competition. While working, Suzuki asks Yamada how things are going between him and Nishi, and Yamada admits he hasn't cracked yet and they are still at the texting stage. At the same time, Nishi confides in Honda about how awkward her chats with Yamada have been. Since it's her first time chatting with a boy, Nishi is worried that her weird style of chatting might have scared Yamada away. Honda then advises her to just block Yamada if she is uncomfortable chatting with him, but Nishi refuses, explaining that she doesn't want to push him away. Meanwhile, back in class, Suzuki teases Yamada for lacking the Rizzed to unlock a girl's honeypot. In retaliation, Yamada also mocks her for fumbling her first ever boyfriend, Ricky, who was a hottie back then. Later that day, Tani and Tara shop for the ingredients needed for food preparation, while on the other side of the store, Nishi and Honda pick up what they need. When Nishi spots Tani and Tyra, she gets nervous and shows Honda the guy she is crushing on. While they discuss Tani, Tyra suddenly notices them gisting, and the Delulu prince immediately assumes the babes are talking about him. This makes him uncomfortable, so he tells Tani that they should leave the mall. Back in class, Azuma is interested in learning about this hot Ricky of a guy since she has a thing for bad boys. However, since Suzuki doesn't want to talk about her ex, Azuma pesters Yamada to tell her all about Ricky. Yamada agrees, and the first thing he tells her is that Ricky is a great guy. He also tells her that Ricky will be attending their school festival, so she will get the chance to meet him in person. Moments later, while chilling under a tree, Tyra is desperate to learn a thing or two about rizzing up bad chicks. So he asks Tani how a gloomy loser like him manages to bag a cheerful baddie like Suzuki. Tani tells him he doesn't know how it happened either, and Tyra is surprised by his response. Once preparations for the school's cultural festival are complete, the festival begins, and everyone is excited to have fun. On day 2 of the festival, visitors start trooping in their numbers, so Suzuki and Tani decide to take a stroll around the carnival ground for some sightseeing. After checking out various activities ongoing, Suzuki suggests they visit the photography club exhibition, and Tani agrees. When they get there, they find none other than Nishi, who is in charge of giving visitors a tour of the place. The instant Nishi sees Tani and Suzuki, she freaks out, but somehow she manages to pull herself together, and for the first time, she communicates well without messing up. After Tani and Suzuki leave, Nishi feels more confident in herself and believes she can now talk to anybody. But suddenly, Yamada, who is deeply engrossed in a phone conversation, bumps into her and causes her to lose all the aura points she had just gathered. Meanwhile, Amura tries to force Tyra out to have fun, but in the hallway, they bump into a hot guy who claims he is searching for Yamada. Since they also didn't know where Yamada was, the guy leaves, but Amura is already simping for his BTS charm, and that's when she realizes the guy must be Ricky. Right about the same time, Suzuki and Tani are returning from touring the carnival, when they suddenly walk past the strange guy. Immediately, the dude recognizes Suzuki, and Suzuki is shocked to find out that the guy is Ricky, her ex. After she nervously introduces Tani to Ricky, Suzuki tries to have a friendly conversation, but the chemistry between them is just off, making it very awkward. Years back in junior school, Suzuki and Ricky started off as friends. However, because of how much time they spent together, their naughty classmates wouldn't let them be and started tagging them as a couple. Tired of explaining that they aren't a couple, Ricky goes with the flow and asks Suzuki out on a date. Caught off guard by the sudden request, Suzuki freaks out at first and then accepts. Later that day, while they head home, Ricky pushes his luck further by trying to kiss Suzuki, but Suzuki curves him harder than a boomerang, and this makes him realize she isn't feeling him as much as he thought. Back in the present, Suzuki feels bad for turning Ricky down in the past and wants to apologize. But Ricky, noticing the tension, assures her that they are just friends and then leaves to continue searching for Yamada. Just then, Suzuki notices Tani giving Ricky the stare of death, and it terrifies her, as she realizes he must be jealous. She then frantically tries to explain that Ricky is her ex and that nothing is going on between them, but Tani just walks away, saying he needs to clear his head. Sometime later, Ricky eventually finds Yamada and tells him how he bumped into Suzuki. He also admits he is at fault for things ending the way they did between them, but now he claims he is more focused on bromance than on any romance. Meanwhile, under the staircase, Suzuki is having an emotional breakdown about Ricky's sudden presence and Tani's jealous tantrums. So she confides in Nomura as a friend, hoping she can offer some advice. However, she quickly realizes the hoe isn't interested in giving her any relationship advice and is only interested in riding Ricky's magic wand to Hogwarts. After Suzuki runs off to solve her problem herself, Nomura bumps into a guy and gets wet thinking it's Ricky, but she dries up immediately when she realizes it's Taira and his unclappable face. Around the same time, Tani is on the balcony, torturing himself with thoughts of how Ricky used to raw dog Suzuki. Suddenly, Suzuki hugs him from behind and reassures him that he is the only one she loves. She tells him that she only wants to hop on his rod and no one else's, and then begs him to stop being jealous. Just then, an announcement blares through the entire school, instructing all students to assemble at the gym. After they finally reconcile, they laugh off the whole drama with Ricky, and then head to the gym to meet the rest of their classmates. Later that night, Ricky, Yamada, Suzuki, and some of their loser friends hold an alumni gathering, where Ricky breaks down, confessing that he hates his current life and longs for the good old days. The next day, at the school cafeteria, Yamada gifts Taira and Tani how Ricky had wasted everyone's time crying, like a sad little girl at the alumni gathering. Taira then asks Tani if he is cool with letting his girl be in such a miserable gathering with her ex. Tani replies that he is completely fine with it and doesn't want to overthink, so it will not seem like he doesn't trust Suzuki. Shocked by his response, Taira realizes Tani is becoming more confident than he used to be. Speaking about confidence, Taira remembers that before the summer break, Yamada had confidently told everyone he was crushing on a girl. This makes him wonder if Yamada had any luck bagging his crush since then. However, he decides not to bring up the discussion until Yamada himself is ready to talk about it. Back during the summer festival, when Yamada and Nishi had bumped into each other at the photography club exhibition, they stood for almost an hour, too shy to say anything to each other. Then, when they finally decide to break the silence, they end up speaking at the same time like two dummies. Nishi then asks Yamada to go first, so Yamada apologizes for being so pushy with his texts, but Nishi admits she enjoyed reading his messages. She also explains that she doesn't reply as quickly because she always overthinks to avoid mistakes before she sends a message. Hearing this, Yamada realizes that he and Nishi are polar opposites, so he advises her not to worry about making mistakes when she chats with him. He also tells her to scold him whenever he is being annoying, and this makes Nishi blush, while laughing at the same time. After this conversation, Yamada and Nishi make a little bonding progress, and Taira notices that ever since the cultural festival, Yamada has been in an oddly good mood. While walking home that day, Taira thinks about his miserable life, and how he is the only mofo no chick wants to smash. This makes him remember one heartbreaking moment in his past when he got coldly turned down by a chick who was interested in his character development. However, since he doesn't like to remember such tragic moments, he plugs in his earbuds to listen to Love the Way You Lie by Eminem. As he blasts this music and continues his journey home, he suddenly bumps into Suzuki and Tani, who are also on their way home. So they walk home together while gisting about cone ice cream Suzuki wants to buy at the convenience store where Taira works. The following day at school, Nishi runs into Yamada and panics. However, when she remembers Yamada urging her to be free with him, she summons the courage to talk to him, and Yamada playfully teases her for initially hesitating. Moments later in the hallway, Honda sees Nishi and Yamada walking together like a couple and freaks out. Desperate to know what the heck is going on between them, she immediately pulls Nishi to the side for a girl-to-girl talk. She asks Nishi what she thinks of Yamada, apart from the fact that the guy is packing a mighty weapon in his pants, and Nishi nervously admits that Yamada makes her heart pound fast. Seeing that Nishi has completely lost her senses over Yamada, Honda advises her not to get too hooked on his big meat, and suggests she flirt with other guys to see if her heart will pound too. Nishi agrees to take her naughty advice, but first she says she will need to get over her anxiety while communicating. She also mentions that she is jealous of Honda, who isn't shy to talk to people, but Honda explains that it's simply because she hates people in general. Later that day, after library duties, Tani and Nishi head home, and on the way, Nishi thinks about how she is now free with Tani, and no longer gets nervous around him. Suddenly, a badminton shuttlecock lands on Tani's head, and when he looks outside, he sees his friends playing while waiting for him. After Tani and Nishi meet up with them, they all walk home together as a gang, but Nishi is nervous about being a part of them. While they all gist, Nishi finds their conversation funny, so she laughs sheepishly like she always does. When Yamada notices her laughing, he falls in love with her weird style of laughing all over again, so he turns himself into a clown so she can laugh even more. The next day at the lockers, Tani runs into Nishi, and for the first time, she confidently greets him good morning without shaking nervously. But just as she starts feeling proud of herself, she suddenly spots Yamada coming and quickly zooms off in panic. Suzuki notices this, but as a girl who understands the streets, she knows that a shoddy can only do that if she has a crush on a boy. However, since she had earlier seen Nishi and Tani talking, she begins to suspect that Nishi must be crushing on her man. Before long, while in class, Suzuki starts interrogating Tani about Nishi and what they do when they are all alone in library duties. Tani finds Suzuki's behavior creepy, so later during lunch break, he links up with Taira and asks for relationship advice on why Suzuki has suddenly developed an interest in Nishi. Taira tells the dummy that it's because Suzuki is simply jealous, but Tani is confused since he hasn't done anything to make her jealous. As a piece of advice from a certified gooner, Taira then tells him to probably start paying attention to his babe before some trap goons snatches her cheeks away from him. After school, Suzuki asks Tani if he has library duties that day, and he confirms that he does. She then asks whether his library wife will be there as well, and Tani nervously confirms that she will. However, when he tries to talk with her about Nishi, Amura shows up with some goodies, which attracts Suzuki and distracts her from the conversation. Throughout their library duties, the tension between Nishi and Tani is as intense as a high-voltage power line. The silence is deep as they both struggle to strike up a conversation. While Nishi thinks about her sudden likeness for Yamada, Tani reflects on Taira's advice. After they're done with library duties, they both leave the library still deep in thought about how to solve their individual problems. At the end of their brainstorming, they both decide on the same solution. The next time they see their love interests, they will surely talk to them. Just as they leave the school building, they find the gang playing with bubbles like little brats. Nishi tenses up the instant she spots Yamada, and seeing how tense she is, Suzuki ignores Tani like trash and then asks Nishi to play bubbles with them. Nishi agrees with a smile on her face and immediately joins the others. While watching them have fun, Suzuki recalls the day they all walked home together and how Nishi laughed at every silly joke Yamada made. This finally makes her understand that Nishi isn't crushing hard on her man, but rather on Yamada. Just then, Tani decides to have the talk with Suzuki, so he asks why she is so interested in Nishi, but Suzuki brushes it off, saying she just wanted to know what kind of girl Nishi was so they can be friends. The next day in school, Suzuki is all excited about her date with Tani after school, so she flexes about it to Amura and Satu, who are both boyfriendless. She also tells them her plans to take some photo stickers with Tani during the date, and the girls are surprised to hear this since they know Suzuki doesn't like snapping pictures. But Suzuki explains that even though she hates taking pictures, she loves those stickers because they have filters to transform her into a super cutie. After school that day, as Suzuki and Tani head for their date, they bump into Amura, who honestly tells Suzuki she envies their relationship and wishes she could have something like it. Moments later, Tani and Suzuki enjoy a nice treat of sweet potato ice cream. Suzuki is so excited because these are her favorites, so she takes pictures of them. She then asks Tani to strike a gangsta pose so she can also take a picture of him, but the swagless goat ends up posing like a baddie. While Suzuki gulps down the sweet potato, Tani snaps a photo of her stuffing her face, which embarrasses her. After they finish the potato treat, Suzuki suggests they visit the photo booth, and Tani agrees despite hating it. So together they enter the booth and take numerous couple pics, even though Tani refuses to smile and prefers to look like a villain. After they finish taking the photos, Suzuki excitedly thanks Tani for joining her, then says she'll make an album with the pictures and share it with him. While she creates the album, Tani glances at the embarrassing photo he took of her on his phone, and after laughing at it, he sends it to her. When Suzuki sees the picture, she freaks out and begs him to delete it, but Tani refuses, insisting that he wants to keep it. Meanwhile, later that night, Amura receives a message from one of her exes who ghosted her for years, begging to hit one last time. Despite being shocked by the message, Amura brushes it off and simply responds with an emoji. The next day in class, Amura gists with the gang about the sudden text message she received from her ex. Then, in a matter of seconds, she shifts to lamenting about her single life and how she had been used and dumped by numerous Discord mods. Hearing this makes Suzuki furious, so she scolds Amura for letting every nincompoop with a dangling sausage smash. Yamada, however, is already bored with Amura's life story, so he suggests they do some fun stuff instead. Excited to hear this, Ruka immediately suggests they go bowling, and everyone agrees. Sometime later, when they arrive at the bowling center, Suzuki asks Tani if he has ever bowled in his life, and Tani replies that he used to back when he was little. Thinking he might not know how to bowl anymore, Suzuki then offers to teach him. Meanwhile, Taira notices some of his former junior school, like Nepo baby classmates, and their presence makes him uncomfortable. Not wanting them to notice him, he tries as much as possible not to look at them, as he doesn't want them to find out he is now hanging out with losers. Amura, who also happens to know the spoiled brats, notices Taira hiding from them, so she meets him and assures him that they won't see him. At the same time, the rest of the gang continues to enjoy a game of bowling, and when Suzuki sees how good Tani is, she is both impressed and shocked. Hours later, after enjoying a fun-filled day, the rest of the gang bids goodbye to Amura and Taira, who had to stay behind to wait for a train. While waiting, Taira curiously asks Amura if she's still hanging out with those spoiled losers from junior school. Amura admits that she used to, but she stopped when things became too complicated. She explains that one of them used to be her ex, and in fact, she got tired because they were all smashing each other. Shocked to hear this, Taira asks her to further explain the nonsense she just said, so Amura simply tells him that in the group, they were all passing each other around like the last tip of a blunt. Just then, Amura gets another message from her ex, saying he saw her bowling. Disgusted by her ex's audacity, Taira advises Amura to get angry and stop letting herself get treated like trash. Moved by his words, Amura admits that she is a sucker for love, and when she loves, she paints every red flag green. Still, Taira doesn't understand how that is even a reason why she lets herself get treated worse than a doormat by bottom barrel dudes. Later that night, as Amura rides her bike home, she reflects on everything she and Taira discussed and realizes she needs to start valuing herself and her kitty more. The following day at school, Amura runs into Yamada at the lockers. However, as she tries to thank him for his advice, Yamada apologizes for overstepping his boundaries and walks away, leaving her confused. That night at Suzuki's apartment, her mom tells her that her dad and brother will be away for the weekend, and then asks her to invite her boyfriend over. When the weekend arrives, Suzuki walks Tani to her crib, while her mom is so excited about the visit that she has already ordered delicious meals and is waiting for them. Soon, the doorbell rings, and as she opens the door, she sees Tani and freaks out since she has never seen such an ugly person before. However, since he is Suzuki's Prince Charming, the mom lets them in, and they have lunch together. After a while, Suzuki notices her mom acting weirdly around Tani, so she decides to take him up to her room instead. instead. There, she apologizes to Tani for her mom's weird behavior, but Tani tells her he understands, explaining that he has such a deep effect on naughty moms. Suddenly, it starts to rain, and Suzuki comments on how much she loves the rain, especially when she's indoors. To her, rainy season means cuffing season, so she starts laying the groundwork by slightly touching Tani's hands. Tani reciprocates by touching her hand, but just as he is about to crack from the back door, Suzuki's mom interrupts by bringing them some snacks. Later, when the mom returns to the living room, she suddenly sees her husband, who was supposed to be away, drenched by the rain. As he takes off his smelly socks to head to the room, she freaks out and then informs him that they have a guest in the house. Back inside the room, the rain grows heavier, so Suzuki shyly asks Tani for a hug, and Tani agrees without a word. This makes Suzuki happy, and she later teases him for getting a hardwood while they hugged. A few minutes later, Tani and Suzuki walk into the living room, where Suzuki freezes the moment she sees her dad. After she nervously introduces Tani as her boyfriend, the dad freaks out and starts acting all crazily excited around him. Soon after, Suzuki walks Tani home, and along the way, she apologizes for her dad and mom acting like maniacs. But Tani just laughs and then teases her about having nutcases as parents. Several weeks later, Suzuki is excited about Tani's upcoming birthday, but she is conflicted about what to get for him. When she asks Yamada for ideas, the macaroni head suggests she just make an anniversary album for him. Not satisfied with his suggestion, she then asks Taira for his own idea, but Taira nervously tells her that it isn't the gift that matters, but the intention. Impressed by his response, Suzuki and Yamada gasp in shock and then compliment Taira on how much his brain has developed over time. After listening to both of their opinions, Suzuki decides to get Tani a gift that will blow his mind. The next day in school, Suzuki gives Tani a gift for Halloween, and Tani notices how excited she is about giving him gifts. This makes him feel Suzuki might go all out for his upcoming birthday. Back then in junior school, his class had this tradition of celebrating each classmate's birthday. However, when it got to Tani's turn and they all wished him a happy birthday, his gloomy reaction made them regret the decision. Back in the present, Tani doesn't want a repeat of the past, so this time, he Googles how to react when excited. When his search results don't come up with anything meaningful, he decides to ask Taira for help during basketball practice. Before Taira can respond to his question, Tani gets called to practice, so he leaves Taira questioning if it's about his upcoming birthday. Turns out that day is Taira's birthday, and even though he tries to convince himself that he doesn't want to be celebrated, deep down he feels miserable thinking everyone forgot about his birthday. Just then, Amura finds him on the staircase, and after asking him to help her take out the trash, she wishes him a happy birthday. She also gives him a bread sticker for his birthday, and Taira is excited, even though he tries to hide it. The night before Tani's birthday, his eyes are heavy, but he decides to stay awake, reasoning that Suzuki might call him. As expected, Suzuki's call comes in, and at midnight on his birthday, she wishes him a happy birthday and tells him she loves him. The next day in class, Satu and Ruka gift Tani a sticker for his birthday, while Yamada gives him gummies, and even Taira gets him a chocolate bar. After school that day, Suzuki and Tani visit Taira at the convenience store where he works. Since his birthday was the day before, Tani and Suzuki gifts him a chocolate bar, and then wishes him a happy birthday, which leaves him feeling emotional. That night, Suzuki celebrates Tani's birthday in the park with a cake, and after they both eat the cake, she gives him a scarf as a birthday gift. As Tani checks out the scarf, she blushes hard and says she will be super happy if he wears it. Suddenly, Tani takes her hand, and as he gets close, Suzuki almost bursts her fountain, thinking he is about to exchange mouth germs with her. But Tani thanks her for the gift, and just his gratitude is enough to cause her to blush, until her face heats up like a burner. To make her happy, he wears the scarf, and as they head home, Suzuki excitedly suggests spending the weekend anywhere he wants to go. When the weekend arrives, Tani chooses the museum for the date, and Suzuki is surprised at his boomer way of thinking. On getting inside, they find the place crowded, like it's Black Friday at the mall. As they struggle to get inside the main exhibition, Suzuki is caught in the stampede, and once they finally make it in, Tani apologizes for choosing the worst possible place for a date. But Suzuki tells him not to apologize and then excitedly drags him to see the exhibits. They spend hours exploring the museum exhibits until nightfall when they finally have to leave. As they stroll down the street, Suzuki happily admits that she had fun, but then she complains of hunger and suggests they grab something to eat before they go home. After checking his phone, Tani mentions a nearby restaurant, but when they arrive, they discover it's closed. They also check out 2 other restaurants along the street, but seeing that they're expensive, Suzuki suggests leaving before they end up washing dishes. Luckily, they spot some street food, and since it's affordable for Tani's broke account, they buy takeout. While they eat, Tani feels miserable, since this isn't how he planned things to go, from the crowded museum to eating cheap food. When he asks Suzuki if she is exhausted from all that walking, she says she isn't, and she is actually happy that they got to do things that he loved. After they're done with the food, they head home and soon arrive at their parting spot, where Suzuki gets close, expecting Tani to man up and bless her with a kiss. But the shy virgin hugs her instead, and even though this isn't what she wanted, Suzuki takes the fat L and excitedly runs home. The following day at school, Tani is lost in thought, reflecting on what happened the night before. But suddenly, Suzuki shows up as cheerful as ever, and Tani is surprised to see her acting all normal, like nothing had happened. Later that day in class, the teacher, who looks like a homeless crack addict, announces the school trip and then asks the students to divide themselves into groups. As a group, they are instructed to make binding copies of a project assignment, and once the teacher leaves, everyone dives straight into working. Meanwhile, in the other class, Honda asks Nishi if she and Yamada have made made any progress since then, but the question makes her blush hard. All of a sudden, Yamada shows up like a ghost and the girls freak out. He then offers to help them bind their copies and Honda agrees, even though Nishi isn't comfortable with it. However, as they work, Nishi starts getting comfortable with his presence and they end up chatting like buddies. When Honda notices how comfortable Nishi is talking with Yamada, she silently cheers her on and chooses to stay invisible so as not to spoil the good vibe. After a while, Nishi becomes nervous and wishes Honda would contribute to the conversation as well. But instead, Honda excuses herself to the staff room to give them some time alone. Now alone, Nishi almost dies from anxiety as she desperately searches for what to talk about. Noticing how tense she is, Yamada cracks one of his unfunny jokes to make her laugh. Then he tells her to let him know where her group for the school trip decides to lodge on the trip, and Nishi nervously agrees, even though she has no idea why he wants to know. The next day in class, the drunk teacher announces a mistake in the group arrangement and then asks them to form a new group of 3 girls and 2 boys. As Amura brainstorms which of her friends she will form a group with, Suzuki gives her a thumbs up, indicating that she wants them to be in a group together. Even at that, Amura realizes she is getting unnecessarily worked up about the trip, and this bothers her. She figures it must be because all her life she had hated being in a group and had always avoided it. Back when she was in junior school, she was a hottie who attracted all the simps like Dookie to flies. So because of this, all the shotties started asking for help whenever they were interested in a guy. Being the reasonable girl that she was, she accepted the matchmaking role, but in the present, Amura regrets it because she ended up being used. A week later, the school trip commences and everyone enjoys a train ride to the destination. Once they arrive, they all have lunch at a nice cafeteria where Suzuki gets to sit at the same table as Nishi and Honda, and she is immediately captivated by Honda's beauty. Later that night, Suzuki's group and Nishi's group get to stay in the same room. While they play and chill, 2 chicks from Nishi's group won't let Suzuki rest and keep pestering her, tell them about her relationship with Tani. Their continuous interrogation makes Suzuki anxious and almost drives her crazy, so she hides inside the closet to avoid them. Later, while at the steamy bath, Suzuki reflects on her relationship with Tani, and that's when she realizes that all this time she had been the only one trying to initiate any type of romance between them. This frustrates her because all she wants is for Tani to stop being a mama's boy and start treating her like a real man would. Just then, Amura shows up in a towel and asks if anything is bothering her. Not holding back, Suzuki opens up that she wants to be raw dog so bad, but Amura advises her not to rush the process and to enjoy the character development instead. Even at that, Suzuki complains that she at least wants to be smooched, but Amura chooses to remain silent, realizing the issue has gotten out of hand. The next day, all the girls decide to give themselves a glow up so they can flirt with the boys. Suzuki in particular is excited and can't wait for Tani to see her looking like an Instagram model. Soon she finds him sitting close to the vending machine, thinking about how much his social life has improved since he started dating her. Tani admits he is glad to have met her, which makes Suzuki embarrassed because all this time she had only been thinking about getting cracked without considering how he felt. Feeling remorseful, she pulls him by the shirt and then says, "I love you." Her love confession immediately awakens the dragon in his pants, but as he tries to kiss her, Suzuki gets nervous and runs away, leaving him all bricked up. On the second day of the school trip, while heading to the destination, Honda advises Nishi not to ignore Yamada since their groups will both meet anyway. Hearing this, Nishi panics as she has never imagined being alone with Yamada somewhere other than school. So she tells Honda that she would rather stick with her, but Honda scolds her for always locking up her feelings. Shortly afterwards, when Yamada's group arrives at the destination, they discover a love fortune-telling stone that will reveal if a person is loved or not. For the stone to work, a person will have to close their eyes and manage to walk from one stone to the next, so Yamada volunteers to go first. As he starts strutting blindly towards the other stone, everyone cheers him on. However, just as he is about to reach the second stone, an ugly panda boy named Big Dummy suddenly pops out from nowhere to ruin the entire process. Pissed off, Yamada yells at the Big Dummy to get the heck out of his way, because his breath smells worse than a rhinoceros fart. Soon after, Nishi's group arrives, and the instant Honda spots Yamada, she tells Nishi to try talking to her crush. Nishi nervously complains that he is with his friends, and she doesn't want to interrupt, but Honda tells her to screw that and go get that hulk of meat. Reluctantly, Nishi obeys, but as she approaches Yamada to strike up a conversation, she freezes like Windows XP, turning the moment awkward. Later that night, Nishi receives a message from Yamada asking her to meet in the hotel lobby. Immediately, Honda kicks her out of the room so she wouldn't miss her opportunity to get cracked on this trip. Moments later, when Nishi arrives at the lobby, she spots Yamada talking with some curvy baddies. This makes her start to suspect that Yamada is a bad boy player who is only interested in playing with her heart like a game of chess. While she emotionally spirals, Yamada shows up and asks that they talk privately. As they sit in the lobby, Yamada shows her funny pictures on his phone until he gets a notification informing him that the bathwater is ready. With that, he says he has to leave, then asks if they can hang out, just the two of them, sometime after the trip, and Nishi shyly agrees. After Yamada leaves, Nishi runs back to her room in a panic, unable to believe Yamada just asked her out. With how fast her heart pounds and how much she blushes anytime Yamada is around her, Nishi finally concludes that she is in love with him. On the third day of the trip, they board a bus to the destination, and while Suzuki is enjoying her best life, Tani isn't feeling well because he is suffering from car sickness. On the other hand, Mura invites Taira to share her snacks, and while they eat, they also bond. Later that night, when they finally return to the hotel, Tani finds it difficult to walk properly because his stomach aches, so Suzuki decides to sit outside with with him for a while. When she notices he is feeling a bit better, she stands to leave, but Tani holds onto her clothes and asks her to stay with him a little longer, which makes her blush hard. On the last day of the trip, they all go to a park where Tani and Suzuki spend some alone time away from their friends. They stroll around the park, shopping for headbands and matching merch, and enjoy some fun rides. Hours later, Suzuki receives a picture from Amura and the rest of the gang showing that they are having fun at the park, so she tells Tani they should join them. But Tani holds her hand and shyly asks that they take the long way there. This makes Suzuki tense up, but she agrees, and together they slowly walk there. Shortly afterwards, when they join the others, they all take a group picture to remember the school trip by. Days later at school, as Nishi and Honda stroll through the hallway, Nishi spots Yamada hanging out with his friends, so she stops to glance at her daddy, and Yamada shyly waves at her, making her blush. That weekend, Nishi prepares for her date with Yamada, but she is worried because she only has grandma's clothes. However, she remembers her mom once telling her never to be ashamed of wearing what she likes. So, with this in mind, she puts on her 90s gown and then styles it with accessories before leaving the house. A few minutes later, she arrives at the train station and immediately receives a text from Yamada saying he is there as well. After she texts him her exact location, she nearly dies of anxiety. However, when Yamada finds her and notices she is tense, he tries to make her feel more comfortable around him. To start the date, they head to Chinatown, where Yamada suggests they try some local food. While they eat, Yamada tries to be as friendly as possible, so he yaps nonstop until Nishi slowly starts to talk more freely with him. Once in a while, he also cracks his usual jokes, and Nishi couldn't help but laugh. They spend hours talking about the recently concluded school trip and every attraction they encounter. And Nishi, who had just been fidgeting like a faulty clunker, suddenly becomes more confident and open. Soon after, Yamada spots a bridge, so he takes Nishi's hand and suggests that they head over there. Feeling flustered, Nishi also takes his hand, and for the first time, Yamada gets nervous as all the blood in his body flows into his baby carrier. When they reach the bridge, Nishi's heart feels like it's about to explode from experiencing all sorts of emotions at once, and this makes her wonder if Yamada isn't suffering from similar emotions. Suddenly, they spot Suzuki and Tani, who are also on a date, and immediately skedaddle because they don't want anyone to see them together. Later, when they board a train heading back, Yamada returns all the accessories that had dropped from Nishi's bag while she was running earlier. From the accessories, he picks a fluffy hairpin, which he admits he likes very much, and then places it on her bangs. When he realizes he has placed it wrongly, Yamada smiles and says he likes it because now she can look him more in the eyes. Hearing this, Nishi realizes she hasn't been looking him in the eyes, so she apologizes and then loudly promises to ensure their gazes meet from now on. However, a few hours before Yamada and Nishi got to Chinatown for their date, Suzuki and Tani were already having a splendid time there. While they were ordering food, Suzuki suddenly saw Yamada and Nishi using her 20/20 vision, and not wanting to ruin the moment for the shy couple, she immediately disguised herself and then dragged Tani inside the restaurant. There, she figures Yamada and Nishi are now an item, but she keeps it to herself and is excited to share the good news the following week in school. All through that day, Suzuki couldn't stop thinking about Yamada and Nishi, and this made her blush. Suddenly, Tani suggests they ride the Ferris wheel, and while on it, they get so close to kissing, but some nosy brats ruin the mood. Shortly after the ride, they head home, and on the way, Suzuki yaps nonstop about how much she loves Christmas. When they reach a zebra crossing, Tani asks what she wants for Christmas, and Suzuki shyly replies that she just wants both of them together. Right after she says that, she takes his hand, and the moment turns romantic, leading them to almost kiss, but a car's headlights interrupt the moment, frustrating Suzuki. Turns out it's her dad and mom in the car who wave at them to hop in and then drive them home. Comment "School Baddies" if you watch this recap to the end, and if you enjoy anime recaps like this, subscribe to the channel and watch this next video.